Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television with me, Jimmy Mulville.
And me, Peter Fincham.
This is the podcast for people who love TV and who want to know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes in show business.
Jimmy, I can't help noticing you're not here today. You're on a screen with a pair of headphones on, so...
I am.
Where are you?
I'm actually in the most beautiful country in the world. I'm in Ireland.
Are you?
I'm on the west coast of Ireland, just near the Sheen River, near the Sheen Falls, and I'm here on my own. I've got a little project I want to get finished. I thought I'd come here and sequester myself. But where have you? What have you up to?
Hang on, how intriguing! So you're not on holiday; you're on a work trip.
Well, I've been asked to do something. It's to write something, and I needed to get away just to get some headspace to do it. Yeah, it's about my relationship with my football team, and it's very, very interesting. Because it's one of my longest relationships, and
exactly.
and unlike a lot of other relationships, this particular one, they haven't left me. So,
well, I'm sorry. Apologies for intruding on your,
no, that's all right.
on your solitude.
No, it's a welcome break.
Maybe you're grateful for the company.
I am actually. I've been talking to myself for the last 3 days, and it's not going well.
You do travel a lot more than me. I mean, in recent weeks, you've been to Australia, you've been to Korea, you've been to Vancouver, and now you're in Ireland. Your air miles must be fantastic.
That's why I do it. I do it to rack up the air miles so my family and I can go on a free holiday at Christmas. Okay. That's the whole point. That's why my wife's very happy to. Well, not the only reason why she's happy to bid me goodbye on a long trip, but certainly she racks up those air miles, does Karen. Now listen, what have you been up to? Because I know where you've been over the weekend. Come on, spill the beans.
How do you know? How do you know what I've been doing?
Because a little bird told me you were off to Latitude. I know it's a TV podcast, but I've just imagined that a lot of TV people go to something like Latitude, a festival for the older festival goer.
Well, it's not old. No, there's a lot of kids at Latitude. It's a very family-friendly festival. This is in Suffolk.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say, I want to put it out there, with my old band, I've played Latitude 5 times. With no
Have you really?
So, yeah.
Well, they actually paid you?
Well, I'm not going that far, but I used to have, and I'm immensely proud of this, a performer's wristband. And when I came back from Latitude, I would sort of keep it on for about a month till it basically disintegrated and fell off. And in a meeting, I would sort of put my forearm down on the desk with my sleeve rolled up, and I hope that people notice it said "Performer's Wristband Latitude." I kind of felt it was cool.
There's a definition of sad right there, Peter.
I was about to say, other people would say tragic. I thought it was kind of cool, but playing in a band of the kind of midlife crisis options, riding a motorbike, whatever, taking up religion. I think playing in a band is a pretty harmless one, actually.
Full disclosure, I was doing a bit of that as well. The family and I went to the Oasis concert at Wembley.
Yes.
And I was with my wife, so I didn't mind about being on the jumbotron. And I'd have to say, they're a very good stadium band, and Liam is a quintessential rock star. He's unpleasant, he's aggressive, got a fantastic voice, he shouts at the audience, and it was good. It was very good. So we both had kind of musical weekends, but now we are going to talk about TV, aren't we?
I think we should. Shall I get an envelope off
Yes.
Owen? I think the envelope has to come to me today because we can't post it to Ireland. So here we go.
Yes.
I'm going to open it as we speak. A week of tricky news for ITV.
Oh,
now,
yes.
This is a couple of things. This is the news that YouTube has overtaken ITV, become the second most watched video platform in the UK. And this revelation itself is hot on the heels of some mixed half-year results that ITV released last week. We'll get to the results in a sec, but let's start with YouTube. YouTube viewing increased 13% last year.
Yeah.
So here are the raw statistics. The BBC accounts for 19% of all in-home video viewing, YouTube 14, ITV 12, Netflix 8, other broadcasters and non-PSBs 7, Channel 4 and Sky 6, TikTok and 5 at 4%. TikTok get as many viewers as 5. So there's clearly a big tectonic shift going on here, in which what we think of the traditional linear broadcasters are, we all know that they're threatened by Netflix and the other streaming services, but it's actually YouTube who are emerging as the winning platform here.
But what's significant about this headline is it not that we've always assumed, oh, well, the 16 to 34-year-olds are all watching YouTube and older people are watching telly, and a lot of them watching it as it goes out. But the trend is clearly that even older people now, and I may include you and me in that, is that we are now watching, or we're tending to gently migrate across to you, or we're including it more in our viewing habits. Whereas maybe 5 years ago, if you're over 55, you think, I don't want to go into YouTube. What's YouTube? You'd kind of shy back from it. Now people just are used to it. It's the air we breathe. And I think it's not a case of either or. I think it's as well as. I think YouTube's being incorporated.
But let me ask. But I get all that, Jim. But let me ask you, what do you watch on YouTube? Because obviously, if I go to Sky or if I go to Amazon or Netflix or whatever, I see what their latest programs are. They kind of market them, and they have commissioned and pay for them, so they're branded. With the I saw a thing called The Assassin the other day, which is on Prime Video. There's no question that's a Prime Video commission, and they've paid for it. When you go to YouTube, there's no equivalent to that.
But aren't we looking at a world now where increasingly long form content will occupy YouTube real estate, and the BBC eventually won't the BBC and ITV and all of them just put their stuff on YouTube? Because if people are now just turning to YouTube more and more, isn't that the trend? I mean, we'll get onto ITV in a minute, and because I know it's always been, the headline is always ITV is in decline. It's been like that for 30 years, and it's actually doing okay.
I mean, that's a very interesting point. If if the BBC said, well, right from now we're just going to put all our programs on YouTube, would we all start watching them on YouTube? What's the advantage to us rather than going to the BBC, which is, built into all our televisions, and and the iPlay's an app you can get on any device you like.
We used to live in a world where exclusivity was premium, was a desired quality. And now I think promiscuity is the name of the game, where you want your content on as many platforms as possible to just capture those eyeballs. And you can, the BBC...
Like a podcast. A podcast will be available on any podcast kind of app or whatever. Yeah, wherever you get your podcast, like this podcast. Anyway, you can get it anywhere.
Yeah. And so because the BBC in particular doesn't need to monetize, but it needs to increase its viewing. When it goes to the government in a year's time, it needs to demonstrate that as many people in the country are watching it as possible in order to justify the price that we pay to watch it. And the commercial channels...
So let's just follow that argument through. So if the BBC said, right, from next week, we're going to put all our content, all our schedules on YouTube available, both video and audio, television and radio. And by doing so, they increase the total kind of viewing and listening numbers by 20%. They can say to the government, this is good, this is our reach, this is what we call reach. We reach these numbers of people, and in a way they're agnostic about what platform it's on. But that's the BBC. Surely that's not the case if you're ITV or Channel 4 or Sky, where monetizing your content is the name of the game. You pay £1 million an hour for a drama. You want to be sure you've got more than £1 million of income as a result of doing that. That's the basic way that a commercial company works. So how do they avoid YouTube cannibalizing them?
I think it's something that's going to have to be worked out. I mean, the truth is, if the business model of YouTube is that you share advertising revenue. Now, query whether the BBC can have advertising on a YouTube platform, which it can't do obviously on its publicly funded platforms. But the commercial channels wouldn't care about that. They just want to get as much revenue as possible. And so I think there's going to have to be some kind of methodology. I mean, it's interesting for us as content producers, as opposed to TV producers. Now we're content producers because we we're looking at a world in which maybe you and I will be, as we said before, will be providing content directly to YouTube and earning our money from shared advertising revenue.
But YouTube started commissioning properly, as it were, and then stopped. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, because they realised they didn't have to spend money on commissioning programs; they could just be a platform.
Yeah. So you and I, in our kind of day-to-day lives, we do not go around pitching ideas to YouTube.
No.
We pitch them to the people who'll pay for them, to be blunt, and that's pretty much all the others. So YouTube, in that sense, is a platform rather than like a commissioning broadcast. Although, as I say, they have put their toe in that water, but it didn't last for very long.
It's also it's also very difficult, I think, to launch a channel. I mean, we talk about it at Hattrick and about how do you get visibility if you want to launch a channel on YouTube. The amount of marketing you'd spend in order to get people's attention. And then, of course, that's not the ethos. On YouTube, people like the serendipity of finding something for themselves. So the idea that some big corporation or some big flashy company is ramming it down your throat is anathema to a lot of people who like to get their content on YouTube. So it is a conundrum. You're right not to know, Peter, because the truth is no one knows. And the fact is that we're going to have to find out. And these.
And we talked a few weeks ago about the new spitting image.
Yeah.
Which, as a matter of fact, I saw John Thoday, who runs Avalon, who makes spitting image, the other day, and we had a chat about this. I said I thought it was very good because it really was very good, but it's going onto YouTube, and I said, can you monetize it? Can you make financial sense of it? And he kind of laughed and he said, well, we'll find out, won't we?
But exactly.
He doesn't know. He really doesn't know at this point.
But God bless him for having a go.
Look, let's move this on. Let's talk about ITV, but it's also we should talk about 5, because we've just had Channel 5, by the way, which I believe they're about to rebrand 5, not for the first time.
Oh, wow.
My memory is it was called Channel 5 originally. Then somebody said, they had a clever idea, let's rebrand it 5. Then they put the channel back, and now they're losing it again. This is all very good news for sign writers and graphic designers of logos.
Yes.
But what's happened is that Skydance have merged with Paramount, or have they taken over Paramount, because it's some guy, is he called Ellison, who's a 42-year-old guy. Yeah, David who's he's not somebody who came from nowhere, by the way. He's a bit of a nepo baby, is it fair to say?
Yes.
Nevertheless, he's taking over the merged Skydance and Paramount, and that means that 5 is, dare I say it, a distant part of that empire, but 5 will become part of this, and it will be in common ownership, it has to be said, with all 3 media, because part of the backing for the Skydance kind of bid for Paramount is from Redbird, and Redbird, of course, now own all 3 media. So this is money from Abu Dhabi coming into the world of Hollywood and coming into, as it already has, into UK production. So this is a big thing. This is another tectonic shift of plates. And what does it mean for 5?
Well, as you've pointed out, Paramount own lots of different networks across the world. In fact, they own Channel 10 in Australia, which is not that dissimilar to 5. So you've got these 2 networks. 5, I think, is interesting because 5 has, I think, been a success story under the aegis of...
Oh, definitely.
Ben Frau has done an amazing job turning it around.
Very clever man.
I mean, Channel 5 really do punch above its weight, and Ben Frau is doing an amazing job. I mean, they, for example, in 2023, the last figures, I think, that were published, they, on a revenue of 398 million, they turned a profit of 100 million, whereas ITV, on a revenue of 1.8 billion, returned a profit of only 146 million. What could be interesting here is this guy, David Ellison. Let's face it, he's got big ideas. He's 40 years of age. His dad is a tech billionaire. He kind of gets what he wants. I wonder whether he'll use Channel 5 to, what's to say he doesn't make a bid for ITV? Because it would make sense, wouldn't it? If you think that the way we've just been talking about the power of YouTube, it's going to make sense. One day, I think British broadcasters are going to have to come together to fight the big foe, which is YouTube, Netflix, all the other big streamers. Wouldn't it make sense in the end, maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, for Channel 5 and ITV come together, and for Channel 4 to go into UK TV and become a commercially funded public service broadcaster? Doesn't that kind of make sense?
Well, they're slightly different issues because if you merge Channel 4 with anybody, and remember there was once talk of a 4-5 merger, the danger is you lose the Channel 4 remit and its distinctiveness. But let's put that one aside just for now. So would he buy ITV in a couple of years' time? Well, if he made a bid for ITV, I predict that ITV would roll over on its back and ask it to tickle its tummy, because ITV's been trying to sell itself for like 15 or 20 years. ITV literally have got a kind of for sale sign, like a kind of old estate agent's board outside the building. So he's not going to meet ITV saying no, 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 we don't want to sell to anybody under any circumstances. So I agree that's possible. I mean, in the past, that would have been referable to the Competition Commission or the Monopolies Commission or whatever. In other words, because the problem there is not actually share of viewing. I think I'm right in saying it's the share of the advertising market. That if you get above a certain level, you're deemed to have a kind of monopolistic powers. The irony being there, of course, the advertising market has now dissipated so much with advertising finding its way to Google and to Amazon and everywhere else, that the idea that anybody in the old-fashioned broadcasting game could have anything that resembles a monopoly becomes kind of absurd.
You're absolutely right. In fact, there was a journalist called Lucas Shaw at Bloomberg who said that YouTube generated 9.8 billion in ad sales in the last quarter. So that's,
there you go.
And that dwarfs every Hollywood company as well.
But let's not forget that ITV was set up in the 1950s as a series of regional franchises precisely to stop it becoming too monopolistic. And the phrase "a license to print money" was coined about ITV and those ITV companies because they had an advertising monopoly in their region: Granada, Tyne Tees, Yorkshire, Central, etc. So the things have moved so far that even when you merge all those ITV companies, you still haven't got anything remotely resembling a monopoly. But I wonder whether we should talk about, because I wonder whether this is also the absolutely key issue here. If we move on a bit to talk about the ITV results, the great difficulty of the strategy that you strike in terms of migrating from a linear schedule to streaming. And ITV in the last few years, if they've made one move, and you could, if you wanted to be critical, say it's the only thing they've done, is to launch ITVX and say we're in the streaming business. Now, yes, they are, but does the streaming business yield the same revenues as the declining traditional business? Arguably not, if you're in it at the scales they're in it. And they went in saying we're going to premiere ITV dramas on ITVX, and the truth is they've retreated from that. And they launch ITV dramas simultaneously on ITV1 and ITVX, but they know that the way to make money is still to bring people to the linear schedule, old-fashioned, legacy, declining as it is, because there you can reach what is still kind of a mass audience. So the cleft stick that a company like ITV is do we, if you like, keep funding and kind of focusing on what we've traditionally been in for 70 years, because there's still money to be made of that, or do we go headlong into streaming, where we're going to meet some very, very well-resourced rivals, and we're very unlikely to beat them?
Well, you see, because you and I were going to jump into this kind of farrago of information, and let's face it, it's these kinds of meetings where we discuss figures aren't the kind of meetings that you and I really pay attention to in our daily lives. So I thought we should reach out to someone who knows about these things. So I contacted a friend of our podcast called Stephen Price. You know Stephen Price?
I know Stephen Price. He was the scheduler for ITV1 when I joined ITV in 2008. He's an excellent man.
Well, his title, I've just checked, was actually controller of the ITV schedule. So they gave him. So Stephen, the controller, I reached out to, and I said, can you just run your eyes over these figures and just give me a kind of view? And he said, I suppose my first thought is they're not as bad a set of results as most people feared. He said, you have to look at last year where there's a major football tournament which boosted the figures, so the drop does feel more precipitous than it really, really is. Like we run our company, sometimes you'll have a good year and then you'd have a pretty good year the following year, but it's not as good as last year. So it looks like you've taken a dip. So he then does go on to muse about the streamer strategy. And he said he notices how ITV, to your point, has now reversed its original plan, especially in relation to drama. The idea was to launch a series on ITVX in its entirety first, before linear transmission. Now, they will launch simultaneously on ITVX and ITV, and as a box set on the streamer after the series is finished. He said, I was taken by Carolyn McCalls, who's the CEO of ITV. She's the big chief over there. Her observation is, amazingly, a lot of people don't want to watch or binge the box set, and they like to watch it every week. Well, no shit, Sherlock. It's the people have been watching weekly television, Carolyn, for 70 years. Scores of years, and they rather enjoy it.
Why are you surprised? It does make me laugh. And I shouldn't say this really. I've seen the email that Carolyn McCall sent to the staff on the day of these, slightly disappointing results.
It was corporate bullshit, wasn't it?
It was sort of the owner of White Star saying the maiden voyage of the Titanic went very well in so many respects. We were going at very fast speed. The food was excellent. The band played. And then in the last paragraph, next year we're hoping to get to New York. It was a little bit like that. And I bet it about you. I don't know Carolyn McCall. She's got a tough job. And whenever we talk about people doing these jobs on this podcast, we always say, thank God we haven't got to do these jobs because they're so tough.
But the truth is, as Kevin Ligo pointed out, he said, that ITV is still the biggest marketing platform in the country. The simultaneous viewing of an ITV show is still pretty impressive when it comes to wanting to sell your goods. So it's still got value. I mean, listen, it was created in the 1950s.
Yeah, but the logical extreme of that argument is let's forget about streaming and just, if you like, stick to our knitting and make money out of this declining but nevertheless profitable business of being a linear broadcaster.
Well, I
agree. That's a perfectly reasonable argument.
I don't think you can do that because the digital world is here, so you have to embrace it in some way. But I think what they're trying to work out now is how do we incorporate ITVX with ITV? They've only got we've only got one budget. We don't have a budget for ITVX and a separate budget for ITV. We pick our and by the way, some of the programs they pick are brilliant. So creatively, I think they do. I mean, Kevin Ligo and Polly Hill this year were honoured at BAFTA for bringing Mr. Bates versus the Post Office to the screens.
Yeah, and rightly so. Absolutely rightly so.
So they're doing a fantastic job creatively in many ways, but they have, as you say, they have this conundrum. When it was set up in the 1950s by Sidney Bernstein, the Lord Bernstein, he famously did say, as you said, it's a license to print money. But there was no competition. There was the BBC. That was it. By the way, Sidney Bernstein sounds like a fantastic guy. He used to go into the building in every morning at 8 o'clock through separate entrances and then knock on an office door and introduce himself and have a cup of tea with the staff who were just getting ready for their working day. And one day he walked in on an office and saw a young producer having sex with a young woman over a desk. And that was apparently a young researcher on a documentary series that they were both making. And he calls up HR and says, I want that young man fired. It was disgusting. I had to excuse myself. I couldn't believe it. And they said, well, we can't, sir, because he's actually doing a massive documentary series. It's all in his head. He's got all the contacts. It would destroy the series. He said, well, get rid of her. He said, we can't. The unions would be absolutely furious. He said, well, get rid of the fucking desk then. So that is brilliant management because that's...
Is that a true story, Jim?
I hope
too
so.
Good to be true.
I hope so.
Actually, I've got a story very slightly similar to that.
Yeah, go on.
When I was at ITV was in that building on the South Bank, the old London Weekend. This is during most of my time there anyway. And I'm sure you used to visit there. The lifts were a nightmare, basically. You had to get up to the
slowest
20th,
lifts
21st
in
floor.
Christendom.
Slowest, worst lifts. So when you arrived in the morning, you crammed into the lift with lots of people. And the chairman of ITV, not when I started, but he joined shortly after, was a man called Archie Norman, who's very impressive. He's a former Tory MP. He's now the chairman of M&S, and he knows how to be a chairman of a big company. And he, in one meeting, he'd have regular meetings with me. I got on quite well with him. In one meeting, he ticked me off. He said I'd been observed in the lift, not talking to anybody for 21 floors. And what he was basically saying, because it goes back to your Sidney Bernstein, is I should strike up conversation in the lift with people who worked in this department or that department on the way down.
Yes, Peter, you should.
If I try to strike up conversation in the lift, we're all quite British like this. Literally, people would avoid getting into the lift with me and wait for the next lift to avoid having to have conversation. But it sounds as if what Archie Norman was suggesting was what Sidney Bernstein was doing. Knocking on doors and not waiting for somebody to say come in before opening the door. I'm not sure that's a way to run a company.
Well, if you opened the lift door and someone was shagging inside the lift, that would be different.
Well, obviously, by the way, nobody has offices anymore because we're all open plan. So you'd have to be more imaginative. If you
I can say, Peter, that your lift etiquette is
things.
impeccable. I have been in many lifts with you, and it's impeccable. You keep stum.
I've ignored you completely.
And I'm very grateful for that. I don't want to get involved in some kind of spurious conversation with you in a lift. You may remember that at the beginning of this century, I can now say, is that Sky suddenly revitalised. And again, it's something that Stephen Price has pointed out.
Yeah.
And he said, look, at the turn of the century, ITV was managing decline in the face of a newly enriched Sky TV. And then a few years in the kind of the free view revolution. And David Lidderman, who was the rather brilliant, I'm not saying you weren't brilliant, Peter, but he was a brilliant director of programmes over at ITV. He turned it around by big creative ideas. Like, remember Millionaire? He stripped Millionaire every single night, which was absolutely in the face of anyone. When he told me this, he took me out for lunch once, offered me the job of being head of comedy at ITV, which it didn't take me long to turn that down.
This is something you've never told me this?
Yeah, this is 25 years ago. And
were you tempted?
No, not at all.
No.
I never wanted to be a commissioner. I'd rather be a poacher than a gamekeeper. Anyway, listen.
Yeah,
so Millionaire, he said, I'm going to do it every night. I said, you're crazy. And look what happens. I'm a Celebrity. Anton Deck. These all came out of someone's response to managing decline. So why don't...
You're not causing me any offence here. David Lidderman was brilliant and a more visionary director of programmes at ITV than I was. And in fact, during my time... we were still, if you like, living off his commissions. They were also, to give credit where it's due, the head of entertainment during that era was a woman called Claudia Rosencrantz.
Claudia Rosencrantz was great.
Absolutely should share the credit for having, but actually, in the longer term, that creates a problem because those shows that you're mentioning, they're a bit long in the tooth. Britain's Got Talent, 18 years old.
Yes.
I'm a Celebrity, 23 years old.
But I do think that maybe, I mean... that the creative energy that still exists very much within ITV can respond to this and keep attracting. Yes, it's going to change. We know the world's changing, and we don't know where it's going to land. But ITV has been managing decline rather well for the last 25 years.
No, I do get that. But obviously we like talking about creative energy. We like talking about programs. That's what we do and we are. But what we've been talking about today, which is maybe a little bit unusual for us, is at a sort of more macro ownership level, whether it's Skydance and Paramount, whether it's ITV's, pretty precipitous drop in profits this year, the fact that they've retreated from putting, original dramas on ITVX and so on. I think you've sometimes got to look up and say, here's a changing world with uncertainty ahead. The fact that they've faced other moments of uncertainty, like the emergence of Sky or the creation of YouTube in the mid-2000s, doesn't mean that they can be complacent at all about the uncertainty that's facing them. And I know, I still have obviously friends and old colleagues who work at ITV, and when I talk to them, they talk about an organisation that feels very challenged, where morale is not great, and I don't want to reiterate once again. I wouldn't want to be Carolyn McCall for all the tea in China and have that very difficult job. All right, let's move on to something else.
Okay, so we had a very interesting question from a listener who's not an insider. He's not in the world of television. His name is Nico Peratikos. He gets our podcast on the Isle of Antigua. Hello, Nico. Thank you for sending in this very interesting question, which absolutely strikes at the heart of what you and I do for a living, Peter. He says, I'm very much a punter, not an insider, and my question is this. If I were to write a screenplay or a series for TV, what hurdles would I need to overcome to actually get it made? Would compromising and making lots of changes be inevitable? Having listened to Jimmy and Peter talk about how the world of television works, it seems like the odds of something I wrote making its way from my desk to actually ending up on the screen are similar to those of a sperm fertilizing the egg. So what do you think, Peter? Is the metaphor of a sperm and egg a good one for the long and winding journey from idea to commission?
What are the odds of a sperm fertilizing an egg? Biology is not my thing. I think they're quite low.
Depends how.
I mean, I've got 4 children. You've got 3, Jim. So, we managed to defy the odds.
I've got 4
between
children,
us 7 times.
One is my stepdaughter, so I don't want to leave her out of being my children.
No, I don't want to get into the details of this. But I'm saying, in that sense, you've got. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Basically,
biologically produced. Yes.
I think we're probably addressing the wrong side of this question, though. I don't think Nico.
Let's not get wound up on
He doesn't want us to talk
thing.
about sperm and eggs. He wants to talk about television. So the first thing I would say is if you are compelled to write a screenplay, then don't be put off by people saying these are the odds or this is, what television requires is people to say, I've got an idea for a program, I've got an idea for a script, I'm going to ignore the hurdles, the hoops and hurdles, the difficulties, and all the successful writers on television and God knows in any other field of activity today at some point in their career have ignored those odds and they've been determined enough and of course they're talented enough that they found their way through and they get commissioned. Having said that, yes, there are hoops and hurdles. So it depends on so many things. It's sort of almost hard to know where to begin.
Be specific.
Okay.
Tell us a story about something that you had commissioned and was a difficult or maybe interesting journey.
Well, so you're going a bit back to sperm and egg here. If you write an entire script on spec and just send it into a production company, say, what are the chances of ever being made into a program? Not very great, because unless you've got a background in this, an agent, and there's a reason for people to take it seriously, it may sit on what is traditionally called a sort of slush pile. And any production company, and indeed any agent, has a kind of slush pile of unsolicited scripts that they will look at in the hope of finding something that's got real potential. Now, I can immediately think of an example. This goes back when I was running TalkBack, we had a slush pile. There was a lovely producer called Jim Pullen, who went on to become a very successful producer of comedy shows. And for a while, it was his job to read the slush pile. And he would go through the scripts that had just been sent in. And one day he picked up a script and said, I think these guys have got something. Those guys were Graham Linehan and Arthur Matthews, and they were the writers of Father Ted and many other great things as well. So that's a perfect example of, they I think one of them was a journalist, and I can't remember what the other one was doing at this time, but they had no background in television. And by writing a speculative script, they found their way through this tricky system, and it became a hit, and they became highly successful as a result of it.
It's funny that it was a very thorough answer, Peter. But like
you mean it got a bit boring?
I started to drift a bit. But anyway, look,
you went back to writing your book. You've actually knocked off a chapter of your book during the course of that. I mean, there are other things like casting. Try to get a star attached.
Yes, but the thing is that you mentioned Father Ted, and of course that also arrived at Adric, and again Jeffrey Perkins said these guys are really brilliant. But then we sold it to Channel 4. And in those days, Seamus Cassidy, who was then the head of comedy, was Irish, and he knew a lot of Irish actors who we then cast. We cast them all, and they weren't stars at all. And it landed on the air. It got mixed reviews because it was a strange show, but then it became a huge hit. And when it won a BAFTA, Michael Grade had the grace to write as a handwritten note saying, "I didn't get this when I read it. I didn't get it when you pitched it. I didn't get it when it went out. I'm so grateful you brought it to us." So he was a kind of old-fashioned impresario who knew that he didn't have to get everything in order for it to land on air. And I worry sometimes...
I have an exact parallel to that, which is Brass Eye that we made for Michael Grade and Channel 4. Michael Grade, he openly admitted he didn't really get it. And he didn't get that it included interviews with celebrities that we wanted to broadcast without telling the celebrities in advance. He wanted to kind of ring them all up and say, "Hope you don't mind, but we're going to broadcast this." But he also acknowledged that it was Michael knew that if you back talent with true originality, you get results. So even though, if you like, it wasn't perhaps to his taste and he didn't quite get it, he understood why why it was an important program for Channel 4 to make, and that's a very important quality in a commissioner, stroke impresario, whatever you want to call them.
I think producers moan a lot, don't they, about the commissioning process. But my view is, and it's changed over the years, I have to say, when I first started, I thought everyone was an idiot. But actually, I think commissioners know their network, they know their channel, they know their audience. And I say to younger producers, our job is to problem solve with the commissioners what they need for their channel, what they think they need, and maybe surprise them with something which they didn't expect, but they think, oh, that's really good. And I think it's our job to show people what we mean.
And controllers or commissioners respond to people who say, "I deeply believe in this, it's brilliant." I can give you an example slightly in the other direction. When I joined BBC, I was very new to being controller. Dan Patterson, who I think this is a hat-trick show because he was working for you at the time, he'd made a pilot of a panel show. And when I was being briefed in the job, they say, "We're not proceeding with this panel show." And Dan came in, sort of got into my diary and came in to see me. And I said, "I'm sorry that panel show didn't work out." And he gave me a VHS tape and said, "I want you to watch it. It's not as bad as people are saying it was." And I thought, that is not the whole.
You don't put that on the poster.
That's not a great way to change somebody's mind. Exactly. You don't hang that outside a West End theatre. Not as bad as people are saying. You need to be a tiny bit more fulsome.
I've known Dan for many, when he was... He's a brilliant producer. When he was a radio producer, produced Whose Line Is It Anyway, obviously, famously. But we started going in pitching, talking about selling shows. And this is like 30 years ago. Dan would spend the first 5 minutes telling the commissioning editors what shit shows that they were commissioning and how his show was going to be a lot better. And I said, maybe miss the first bit out. Don't tell them that they keep commissioning shit shows. Just get straight into pitching your show.
Who was that bloke who became... There's a bloke who became... I think he became the chair of the... No, Rupert Gavin. What did he become?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, he was in the comedy producing business for a while. And I don't know if this is an apocryphal story, but apparently he went in to Channel 4 to see the very same Seamus Cassidy, who was a fiery character. He commissioned some great comedy, but he's a little bit fiery. And he came in to say, "I've got a comedy which I'd like you to commission." And he brought in the press cuttings of some of the bad reviews of recent Channel 4 comedies to basically say to Seamus Cassidy, haven't been doing very well lately. I can help you. I've got something better than this. Oh, I wouldn't recommend that.
I just want to say one thing to Nico. That is that it's a different thing selling a show in the UK than it is selling it in the US. And you may remember, Peter, I brought over David Crane and Jeffrey Clarick to pitch. They're both big American show-running writers to pitch episodes. And they pitched their show to you when you were running ITV. Yep. And you said, this is the best pitch I'm going to hear all day. But the truth is, he said, normally when a British writer comes in with a script, I think you said he pushes the script across the desk, rather apologetically and says, I think the beginning works really well, I'm not sure about the end. And Americans don't do that. Americans only sell the positive.
Yeah, but I've got to say, because the writer I was referring to there was a brilliant writer, David Rennick, who wrote One Foot in the Grave and many other kind of brilliant. Jonathan Creek, didn't he create and write Jonathan Creek? And yeah, David was exactly that. He sort of shuffled in and he wouldn't look you in the eye and he said, I don't know, I think there might be something here, but I haven't really worked out the ending and I'm not sure the beginning's very good. And you sort of end up sort of saying, give me the script, David. Let me be the judge of that. So that is actually quite an effective selling technique.
It is.
Americans don't tend to. They don't do self-deprecation.
No.
So they do a kind of what's so fantastic about this? And I remember that pitch, and they'd clearly rehearsed it. They'd rehearsed it. So when one ended a sentence, the other one picked it up and said, yeah, I know, and you know that's effective, and it was impressive. But I always used to say to commissioners, commission the program, not the pitch. You know, a good program badly pitched is definitely a better choice than a very, very slick pitch. I mean, Episodes was a good program, of course. A very, very slick pitch of a program that isn't really very good.
I just want to say something about pitching, and you're right about this. About be careful what you pitch, because sometimes if you pitch something and it goes well, you have to make it. And I did that once. We pitched something, and as we pitched it, we realised actually there was something maybe at flaw with the show, and then we had to sit down and make it. And we spent 18 months meticulously planning a failure, which is never a good thing to do.
I pitched a program once to BBC Two to Jane Root. I'd been at our mutual friend Griff Rhys-Jones's house in Suffolk, whereas, you know, he's got a few acres up there, and he had hired a mechanical digger for the weekend because he wanted to, you know, dig a pond or something. And then he ended up keeping it for about a month because he so loved the digger that he more or less kind of, you know, re-landscaped his entire estate. You tried to stop him. He was digging, he was making a pile here. So I thought, diggers, they're fantastic things. There's got to be a game show to be had with diggers. So I went off and pitched it to Jane Root, who was running BBC Two. She said, let's make a pilot. So we made a pilot, and we kind of missed the real problem, which is diggers move very slowly, and health and safety means you can't speed up a digger. So it kind of ended up looking like paint dry. And then a rumour went round that this was all a gigantic TalkBack. This was a gigantic practical joke that I was trying to prove to somebody on a kind of, you know, taking a bet with somebody that I could get a pilot made of the very worst idea anybody had ever had. And the diggers was that practical joke, which wasn't true, but it was quite a good get out when we delivered an unwatchable pilot that went at snail's pace.
I think celebrity
Life's
diggers.
strange.
I think someone would buy that now. You want to dig it up. The most embarrassing pitch I was in America. I was pitching a show written by Justin Spresley and Mark Bussell, who'd written a show called Worst Week of My Life. We'd launched it on American TV on CBS, and it had done quite well. And we were pitching another one of their shows, and CBS really wanted to hear it because, like we said, you know, we had an in because they knew the writers. Their show had worked, so we had a route into the people who say yes. I was in the room with the people. So I'm driving there, and I'm in a rental car, and I'd forgotten to fill the car up, and it ran out of gas, about 100 yards away from a gas station on Ventura Boulevard. So I jumped out, I got one of those plastic cans and filled it up with gasoline, and I ran back to the car to fill up so I could just go to Radford Avenue to where CBS was. And I realised on the run back, I'd spilt petrol all down the right side of my trousers. So my right trouser leg was now doused in petrol. So I
Don't light a match.
I go to the pitch. Well, I go to the pitch and I walk into the room, and the smell of petrol is, how can I put this, obvious. And of course, they want to hug you. Americans want to hug you all the time. Don't touch me. Anyway, but they come up to me and they hug me with a strange look on their face. So I had to say, yes, I am doused in gasoline, and if you don't buy the show, we'll go up. And they didn't buy the show. They didn't buy the show.
But it was a bluff. You didn't burn them all or yourself. Who would have guessed? I think let's just go back one more time, maybe to Nico's question, because I think this is something worth saying. Come back into all creative industries. From the outside, if you haven't written a script, they look very difficult to get into, and those hoops and hurdles that you refer to, it seems like a lot of them. And how can you get through them? If you get inside a creative industry, it's always the same. People are saying, "Where are the brilliant new writers? Where's the new talent? Where's the who's up and coming?" And you could be that. So I would much rather our answer to Nico's question accentuates the positive rather than negative.
Correct.
It might be long odds, but it's absolutely worth trying. And if you've got the talent and the application and hard work, you'll get there, and then you can be the next Jed McKeary or the next Jack Thorne or the next Sally Wainwright or whatever. I think we might be getting to the end of this week. Thank you for giving up part of your Irish writing trip, Jimmy. And thank you very much for listening. Are there any questions about the world of television you've always wanted to ask? Send them our way. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, you can get us on our socials or email us in the usual way. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do tell your friends, and you can listen to it on wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next week.
Even better, you could subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Oh, good point. YouTube.
Yeah.
It's the future.
Okay, thanks for listening.